Hello and welcome to Read Brave Comics, a community-built comics podcast from the Graphomania Podcast Network. I'm Vinton Bain, and today I am by myself. Today we have a shorter episode because sometimes life gets busy, and doing these every week is a little hard, actually. But I didn't want to skip a week, so instead I'm going to quickly go over some of the comics I've been reading, give you a segment for today, and then end with recommendation as per usual, just with only me. Now, before I talk about the comics I've been reading, first I just wanted to say that you should all go check out my other comics podcast, Excelsior, over on the Common Room Radio Network at commonroomradio.com or wherever you happen to find your podcasts. This past week, we did an episode on Mockingbird, Volume 1 and 2 by Chelsea Cain, and it was so much fun. That comic is so great, and it was really fun to talk about. And then Chelsea Cain herself, the author of the comic, listened to the episode and shared it on her Twitter, giving it her seal of approval. It was fantastic. I'm real proud of it. And I think you guys all will love that podcast if you haven't already started listening, since we've mentioned it a few times on here already. And speaking of Mockingbird, well, kind of. This week I read the new issue of Hawkeye by Kelly Thompson. That's issue number 6. And I really think that this series is kind of the spiritual successor to the Mockingbird series. It carries a lot of the same feeling to it. I think if you like Mockingbird, you'll like Hawkeye. I can't recommend it enough. I love this Hawkeye, and I love what Kelly Thompson is doing with this series thus far. Kate Bishop is awesome, and I'm really glad that Kelly Thompson is doing her justice here in her series. This issue, we got a small cameo from Pizza Dog, which that's always going to win my heart. And we continued our story with Jessica Jones. And I think Thompson really writes Jessica Jones magnificently. I really enjoy it. But this ends that little story arc that we had there, and I think in a really good way. The only thing that bothered me about the issue is I didn't understand how these two detectives didn't figure out what was going on before now, because I figured it out pretty quick. But maybe that's just one of those things where you're the reader and you have a bird's eye view and you see things that they don't always see. I don't know. It bothered me a little bit, but not enough to actually take anything away from this great issue. Definitely be reading that. I also started the new series of Secret Warriors. This is by Matthew Rosenberg and Javier Garron and Trad Moore. And this is so far my favorite thing to come out of Secret Empire. This is a series that has Agent Daisy Johnson, which if you're not a big comic fan, you'll know from the TV show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. at least. That's Quake. And she is breaking off from S.H.I.E.L.D. while Hydra is taking over, and she's trying to go underground and fix things to some degree. And she here is teaming up with Miss Marvel and Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, and that's fantastic. Those are two of my favorite characters, and I think they do a really amazing job in here. One of the early on reveals that I really liked, it was a great joke, but it's also really awesome practically in the series, is that Devil Dinosaur can smell Hydra on somebody. And I love that idea. It's wonderful. I'm really glad that they have a Hydra detector on the Resistance side. Fantastic. I also read X-Men Blue, which is pretty good. I really enjoyed it this week, and I will continue on with that series. Nothing really stood out to me as a specific moment or anything, but I think the team was being written really well here, and I'm looking forward to see where this series goes, because it is doing some interesting things and not what I was expecting it to do. So we'll see about that. I think I'm going to drop Weapon X. I know I said previously on the podcast I picked it up expecting to drop it on issue 1, but it really hooked me and drew me in. This issue, on the other hand, while it wasn't bad at all, it was good. There was nothing really exciting or continuing to draw me in. So unless it comes out on a week where I don't have a lot of other comics to read, I might not be continuing to go on with this one because it's not pulling me in enough. Although I do really like Domino on this one. If you like Domino a lot and you like reading about Domino in the comics, this comic's probably going to be for you. I'm not sure where they're going to go with her from here, but I loved her in this issue. I also read All New Wolverine, number 20. This is continuing the story that we started last time with the outbreak on the island, and they're closing everything off, and Laura Kinney's trying to find out why this alien child came and said her name, like she was coming to look for her. And here again, we have a bunch of scientists Although they're studying something biological here, and we have a bunch of engineers, so that's kind of weird. But that's how Marvel does smart people. Smart people are smart people. It doesn't matter what field they're in. I don't get that. Anyways, they're all gathered around to try to figure out what's going on. And some random evil scientist lady who's changed her ways picks up on it super quick and fixes it for everyone, even though you have some of the smartest people in the Marvel universe not catching this kind of obvious thing. That bothered me. That kind of bothered me a lot. But I love Gabby and pretty much everything she's in these comics. But in this issue specifically, she was fantastic. The dialogue was wonderful. I love the characters in this comic. I will continue reading this. It has been some of the best things that Marvel is putting out. I've loved All New Wolverine up to this point, and a little hitch isn't going to get me to stop. I also read Miss Marvel number 18. The cover alone here really got me, because the previous volume of Miss Marvel, issue number 18, and this volume of Miss Marvel, issue number 18, if you put them side by side, you can see that the covers reflect each other. This one calls back to that one. It's really awesome the way they did that. That forethought was really brilliant. I don't think I've seen things happen like that too often, especially when the numbers match like that. That's kind of weird. So obviously they did that on purpose, and they're kind of bringing Bruno back into things, and that was Bruno's stepping off point in that issue, in the previous volume, that is. So here we have an issue that is entirely about Bruno, and I really appreciated that. And it really shows that G. Willow Wilson knows what she's doing, that she can write a issue of Miss Marvel that Miss Marvel isn't actually even really in. Normally that would make me very angry, but she did it really well here. I mean, I think you've all heard me complain when I was reading Ghost Rider, and Ghost Rider was barely doing anything in his own title. That was weird to me. But here, I think it's perfect. Bruno is a big part of this story. Bruno has been a big part of this title as we've continued on, and I'm really excited to have gotten to catch up with him a little bit, and I hope that we get to do that a little bit more, that we don't just jump back and ignore him for another 6 months or something. I really do like Bruno, so I appreciated the way this comic was done. And then we got a Black Panther cameo at the end, and it was wonderful. Moving on from the Marvel side of things to Boom Studios, Godshaper number 2 by Cy Spurrier came out, and that's obviously with the art of Jonas Goonface, who I have sung the praises of on this podcast. He is fantastic. That guy does art that is perfectly suited for me. Look him up, buy his things. He was selling the pages for Godshaper at an absolutely ridiculous low price. But talking about the comic itself, this continues to be a comic that seems to be made specifically to delight me. We have a few different moments in the comic that really made me nostalgic about the nights I spent around the campfire sewing patches on my jeans. It has that punk rock feel to it. It's also got this train hopper feel to it, that crust punk side of things. And it's doing a really original story with heart and humor and adventure. And I can't say it enough. My favorite part is the art. The story is good. The story is really good, but that art, I love it. It's fantastic. Very well done. And Bud is really cute in this one. He's the ghost looking character. If you haven't read it, he's one of the gods in this. So he's adorable. He's great. He's got all these different hats he wears, and I miss his bowler hat. Bring back the bowler hat. Team bowler hat. And finally, this week I read Bug, The Adventures of Forager. This is by Lee Allred, with illustrations by Mike Allred and the coloring done by Laura Allred, as per usual with Mike. And it's fantastic. I've said before on the podcast, I really love Mike Allred's art. It's so beautiful. I love his very unique style that he has. And this comic here being written by Lee, I wasn't sure what to expect because I had no basis for that. But it's just as weird and wild as I hoped and expected from the Allred clan. It has a very Madman feel. And then it has these New Gods connections from DC Comics. And it also heavily reminded me of Vertigo's take on Brother Power the Geek, if you've ever read that. It's really weird. It's a little out there. It's fantastic. And I will continue reading it. And it may end up being one of my favorite things from the Young Animal imprint. All right. So that does it for the comics that I read this week. Now we're going to move on to our segment this episode. This week we have back again Liz Prince, author of Tomboy, Cartoon Network's Clarence comic, many autobiographical comics, and Cody and the Creepies currently being released from Boom Studios, which is delightful. I know you've already heard us talk about it a lot, but it's great. It's fantastic. You should be picking it up. This interview was recorded at the same time as our first interview, so it does suffer from the same problems as her first interview that we had there. Fortunately, we haven't had those problems return again, even though I couldn't quite figure out exactly what caused that to happen. Hopefully, it never happens again. But we had a chance to talk with Liz Prince and do a People's History of Comics with her. So here, we now present to you People's History of Comics with Liz Prince.
So, how did you get into comics? What was the first comic book you remember reading as a child?
So I very distinctly remember the first comic book that I ever got for myself, or that my grandmother bought for me, was an Uncle Scrooge comic that was like an Olympic tie-in issue. And so I actually went online and researched this because I have talked to people about it and no one's ever been like, oh yeah, I remember that. And I found out that it was from March 1992. So that was like the first comic book that I ever picked up and read. And Disney movies and shows and stuff were my favorite thing when I was a kid, and especially Donald Duck and stuff like that, because he was angry, And I've always kind of related to the angry characters. So, so finding those was really kind of the thing that was oh wow, that was my cartoons and books together moment. Yeah. And so that's pretty much the first, besides newspaper comic strips, mm-hmm. or Peanuts or something, that was the first comic book that I read.
Awesome. Did you have a favorite comic series or character growing up?
Definitely Jeff Smith's Bone, which I discovered through those Disney comics, because I had a subscription to Disney Adventures, which some people read Playboy just for the articles, quote unquote. I read Disney Adventures just for the comics, and they ran the first issue of Bone as several parts in Disney Adventures, and it was actually in color, which the comic at the time was not. Yeah. And when that first, I think they ran it over 4 issues, and when it was over and it said you can read more about Bone in his own comic book, I was like, what? And that was the first thing that ever got me to actually go into a comic book store to find those, because they didn't have them at the supermarket or wherever I was getting my comics. And so that was a pretty pivotal part in my comics growth and education. That led me to be in the store and be whoa, well, what's this, or what's this on the shelf? So that was something that definitely my favorite comic series when I was growing up, and I can kind of thank that comic for, I guess, the person I am today. I guess I just owe Bone everything.
Yeah. What about currently? Do you have any current favorite series or characters?
Since I read so many autobiographical comics, it's kind of hard for me to be characters, because they're all people that exist, and a lot of them that I know. But as far as comic series that you could go to the store and pick up, Lumberjanes is something that I've been following. I really love that comic. I hope that people see Cody and the Creepies as kind of the punk rock version of Lumberjanes. Yeah.
Well, if nothing else, that description is going to sell it to me for sure.
Yeah, all of us, yeah.
I heard the free comic book day book that Boom is putting out this year is going to have the first 8 pages of Cody and the Creepies in it, but I heard a rumor that Lumberjanes are going to introduce it as their favorite band, supposedly.
That's awesome.
That's terrific.
I haven't seen that, and I don't know if that's true, or if that was just something that was written online that isn't actually, but I'm wow, that would be really cool.
I'm going to go write him an email to make sure that happens. We heard a rumor, we need it to happen. How have comic books affected you personally? I mean, are there any that have had a really big impact on you? And I know you said a lot of autobiographical stuff, and I mean, we all three read a lot of that stuff. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like a serial comic that comes out or anything like that.
Well, one of the most powerful autobio books that I've read in the last couple of years is a book called Tangles by a woman named Sarah Levitt, and it is a story about her mother getting early onset Alzheimer's, and it kind of like chronicles her like decline in her memory and her ability, and it really just kind of talks about how like her personality really changed, and I've always been someone who's like very terrified of like neurological diseases like that. Like the idea that like your brain could just break down and you're basically like not the person that you used to be is something that is, like I said, utterly terrifying. And so reading this woman's account of her mother like getting Alzheimer's like very young and her just firsthand experience of like watching that go down was something that was like very affecting. It's drawn in like a very straight line kind of style, pretty much like no blacks in it. You know, it's almost just like all just like outlines. And I think it's like a very powerful book. So that was probably the last book that I read that I was really like that book had me crying, and a lot of books like don't really elicit that response from me. So, and then it's been something that I've come back to because my grandmother was actually diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but she's like in her mid-90s, so it's a little less like super tragic, you know. She kind of is like, it's like, all right, you've had a good run. You can lose your mind now, you know, and just have somebody take care of you. But I feel like when you're like only 50 years old, it's kind of like, all right, let's slow that roll.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have a favorite comic book movie or TV show, with comic book movies and TV shows being such a big thing these days?
So I really, really loved Scott Pilgrim. I thought that the way that they like changed the chronology of the story was really cool. And I especially like that there is actually an alternate ending where Scott ends up with knives, because I actually think that that probably should have happened in the series. And then I really liked the Diary of a Teenage Girl movie that came out. I mean, that movie is very affecting, and I think it's a very vital and important film. So but it's also like got some humor in it as well. As far as TV goes, I'm really excited to check out Riverdale. I haven't seen it yet, but the idea of like a creepy like teen murder drama featuring like the Archie cast is something that I'm like, that's brilliant. Like one of my favorite shows is Pretty Little Liars, so I kind of feel like it's like
the same vein. You'll get that CW feel for sure.
Well, I'm excited about that. I haven't seen it, but
someone described it to me as Twin Peaks meets Archie, and I was like, well, I'm finally into Archie, guys.
I actually just read that Archie meets the Ramones comic that came out, and I have to say I was kind of disappointed by it, but I appreciate that there is like a mainstream comic franchise that was like, hey, let's like have a storyline that features the Ramones. So Archie, it's cool. Who knew?
Exactly.
Okay, so a cruel deity is about to destroy every comic in the world. You get to save 5 story arcs or 5 comics. What do you choose?
I think that when you read that question in the future, you should really be like, oh, cruel deity.
Put some feeling into it.
Movie trailer voice.
In a world.
In a world without comics. 5 exist. They are. So I would save Scott Pilgrim, because I go back and reread those 6 books like once a year, and I just always enjoy it. I would save Monsters by Ken Dahl, which is his autobiographical story about having herpes and his experience with it. It's actually really funny. And it's one of those autobio books where you're like, wow, you really went there, man. Good for you. I would save all of Linda Berry's output from beginning to end, because I think that it's just great. And there's so many different things that go on in it. I would save Calvin and Hobbes, like the entire comic series run.
Thank you.
And I would save the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror comics because, one, I really like that they're horror comics, but two, I like that they're drawn in the artist's like actual style instead of having to be like on model.
Right.
And that's been one of my like favorite things to pick up every year. Although I don't think they've done it for the last couple of years. I haven't seen one.
I guess I've never read those comics, but those are my favorite episodes of the show. So maybe I should read those comics.
Cool. There was an issue like a couple years ago that Sammy Harcum, who does like the Kramer's Ergot series, like edited. So it was all like Jeffrey Brown and like indie comics like that, writing and drawing like Simpsons
awesome.
horror stories. And I was like,
So
this is the
cool.
coolest thing ever. Like, one of my dreams is to get to write and draw one of those stories. So hopefully someone at Bongo Comics is listening to this right now.
Yeah.
We'll reach out. We'll send some emails that way too.
We'll campaign for that.
Okay, so you can have drinks with one comic character. And this could be a biographical comic or anything, but who would you pick to have drinks with?
Well, I really debated with this one because, like, if I could choose, I would maybe have drinks with myself. You know,
Yeah.
like, see what I'm actually like. Like, how annoying am I? But if I had to choose,
But it would have to be like a comic book version of yourself. So it's just you, the drawing of you talking back to you.
that would be great. Real life Liz versus Liz. But to continue on my Scott Pilgrim kick, I would have drinks with Kim Pine because I think she and I would really get along with each other.
Nice.
Yeah. I really connect to her sarcasm. Yeah. Our last question is, what's the last comic that you read?
So I picked up this comic called Foggy Notions by a woman named November Garcia yesterday. It was published by Hick and PHoC, and they're autobio comics by, I think she's Filipino. She was living in San Francisco, but I think she lives in the Philippines again. And it was really good. It had like kind of like a Julia Wirtz kind of vibe to the stories, and I really liked the artwork, and I thought it was fun. And that was an autobio person that I hadn't heard of before. And I've also been reading that like 2 hardcover volume of the Collected 8-Ball.
Yeah.
I mean, like most of that stuff I've read before, but
Sure.
you know, since that comic's been coming out like since the 80s, and I was like 8 years old when the first issue of that book came out. It wasn't something that I like had all the issues of. So when that came out, I was like, oh, this is cool. I can read them all in like one place, like at how they were, you know, initially released. So I've been going back through that as well.
Awesome.
So pick up Cody and the Creepies. It's your new favorite comic book featuring your new favorite band. And look for Be Your Own Backing Band, which is a collection of my music-related comics from Razor Cake Magazine. And If You Make It, published by Silver Sprocket Bicycle Club, who's doing the highest quality in punk rock music art these days.
And where can people find you on the web?
Please go to LizPrincePower.com for all of your Liz Prince related inquiries.
And we encourage everyone to go support Liz on Patreon because you will get amazing comics for doing so.
Thank you. Yes, please give me money. I really want to get to that $5,000 a month so I can jump around in the street going, we got $5,000. We got $5,000.
That should be, you should make a video of that, and that'll be a Patreon exclusive of you celebrating it.
Definitely do that.
Like Scrooge McDuck and his like vaulted coins going for a swim.
And if we get to I forget what I think like $100,000 a month or something is like my other joke goal. I'll get my solid gold house and my rocket car, and I don't need it. I'm not thirsty. So. Great.
Good.
Thank you,
Awesome.
guys.
That was so fun. Thank you.
All right, it's almost time for recommendations, but first I wanted to talk about this new X-Men TV show, The Gifted. the trailer, the first trailer here dropped for it, and I watched it, and I want to be really excited about this because Legion was fantastic. And just coming hot off the heels of that success, I was like, this should be glorious. Unfortunately, we have Bryan Singer again. And that's not to say that I didn't enjoy some of the things that Bryan Singer did. I did enjoy those. But maybe it's time for some new faces in this world of making X-Men media. And in the trailer, what I felt and what I saw was just more of the same. It had that feeling of X-Men 1, X-Men 2, but it also had this feeling of more of the same of superhero television. It had that feeling of Heroes Reborn, perhaps. It's just more of the same. And so it really left me wondering whether I was ever going to care about this show. I hope they completely blow me away with it. I hope that I fall in love with the show and they do some really original things with it. But I am not impressed by that trailer. And I feel kind of like they're just trying to steal the Runaways story before Marvel can release their Runaways show on Hulu, which I'm super excited for. The promo pics for that, fantastic. Yeah, we'll see. That's not the way to do things. Don't steal a story hoping that you can get it first, especially not if you're not going to do it well. And then Marvel's just going to come in and do it better than you. Yeah. Anyways, I want good things for the X-Men. I want great things for the X-Men. Always. Fox, just give back the X-Men. Just give them back. Just stop. Take a hint from Sony. Stop. Give the Fantastic Four back while you're at it. Okay, bye. All right, so that was my moment to talk to Fox, deal with them on a heart-to-heart level, and now, recommendations. I don't know why I even do this segment because I always tell you what I'm recommending in the first part. I'm recommending Bug. It's great. The All Red Clan knocks it out of the park. I'm not a big DC fan, but I love those New God connections. Anything that's Kirby-esque or Kirby related, I'm in for. And that's going to be it for our show today. You might have noticed some new segment music there. That's from The Last Hope, a Pittsburgh-based band that doesn't play anymore, but they're some friends of mine, and I got permission to use their music on top of the other music that I already have and use. As always, we have our theme song by the Scurvies, so thank you to both those bands for the music on today's episode. If you'd like to support this podcast and all the podcasts on the Graphomania Podcast Network, check out patreon.com/Graphocast, GRAPHOCAST. Follow us on Twitter @read_brave. We'd love to interact with you on there. And follow us on Instagram @readbravecomics. If you'd like to dialogue with me personally, I'm @FleshEater on Twitter. Hopefully next week I'll find a guest host and won't be so lonely. Bye! This has been a Graphomania production. If you would like to hear more podcasts, go to graphocast.com, GRAPHOCAST.com. Follow us on Twitter @Graphocast and like the Graphomania page on Facebook for news and updates.